right, welcome back. It is the Vegas Take Sharp and Shapiro. Also, it's Monday. That means Chris Wynn joining us as well. So it's kind of like we kind of have like 2-on-2 now when it comes to the right and the left. I kind of like this. So Republican Nevada State Senator Keith Pickard is in studio now. And Keith, thank you so much for being here. So he was in the other room and he heard that last segment at the end there where I just destroyed that caller, and he's probably thinking to himself, oh my God, what am I getting myself into? But anyway, Keith, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So a lot of stuff I want to get to in a short period of time. Obviously, we're going to talk about education. I know that's very passionate, one of those things that you're extremely passionate about, and your history, you used to be a teacher. So we're definitely going to talk about that. But a lot of things I want to get to. Now, you've been on the record as saying that you believe education is more important, that we should be talking about that and addressing that rather than guns. Explain that position to me and why you feel that way.
Sure. Well, there are a couple of reasons. Number one, guns are certainly an important issue. It's not something we want to ignore, and I'm not suggesting that we set that aside. Mm-hmm. It's just that it takes so much of the news cycle. It takes so much time away from the things that affect more people every day. And education affects all of us. If we don't get the education piece right, nothing else really matters. Now, I do put that second to public safety. The most important thing we could ever do is make sure that everyone in our society is safe. But aside from that, the next most important thing is educating our kids. Our future depends on it.
And I don't, and Senator, I do not disagree with you. I don't know if I would have phrased it that way and said that, you know, one's more important than the other. They're both important, and I want to get into more detail in education. But I want to start off by talking about gun legislation, gun laws. As you know, you lived in this area for a long time. You know, we had the biggest mass shooting, sadly, in American history, right on the Strip. So we've heard a lot about these red flag laws, and Donald Trump spoke tough after this horrible shooting. After Parkland, you know, we heard some tough talk. After, you know, the Las Vegas shooting, we heard tough talk. Nothing seems to get done. So we're talking about I want to talk to you about red flag laws because you're opposed to red flag laws. Steve Sisolak in his statement said the law was a piece of the puzzle of how Nevada was tackling the gun violence problems. After enacting red flag laws in Indiana and Connecticut, a decrease in firearm-related suicides by 7.5%, 14%, respectively. In 51% of mass shootings, the shooter had displayed warning signs ahead of time, possibly. Red flag laws could have stopped some of those shootings. In no way, shape, or form am I insinuating that red flag laws would end all mass shootings. I would never make that statement. But yes, I'm one of those people that does believe that red flag laws would help. Yes, I'm one of those people that does believe that some of these assault weapons should not be sold on the streets. Yes, I believe mental illness is a huge problem. I get it. We got to get the guns in the hands of the right people, not the wrong people. No, I don't think that more guns is the answer. What do you say to all this?
Well, first, I'm not opposed to red flag laws. I want the red flag laws to be written right, to be written well.
So what does that mean?
So, for example, in the one that we just got shoved through, it was not subject to debate. We never debated the bill. They took the language out of a bill that was never even brought for a hearing and plugged it into SB 143. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we did the dog and pony show where we pretended to have a hearing on it, and then it moved forward. The problem that I saw with the language of that bill was not about trying to get at the root cause, because ultimately mental illness, I believe, is at the root cause of these problems. I mean, when I was a kid, I was on the rifle team. I used to take my rifle into my high school, and we had a rifle range in the school. Mm-hmm. It was below the stage. And so we'd take it in, we'd lock it up, and then we'd go about our business. Right. We used to have guns and gun racks in the cars and trucks, and it was not a big deal back then because the mindset of the student was different. And now we're dealing with a lot different situations. But at the end of the day, what we had was the law says that anyone can write an affidavit, can sign an affidavit saying, yes, this person displays dangerous behavior, and then we end up essentially disarming them without any real due process, right? Now, there's some extent of that we do need to probably allow, because it's the initial reports that we need to take seriously, that we're missing when we talk about the Parkland shooting. Now, the incident here, the reports, as I recall, were that he was a little bit strange, that he kept to himself, but not that,
Paddock.
Yeah, Paddock.
Yep.
But that there wasn't any overt declaration.
Agree.
Right.
I don't think we could have stopped Paddock from.
There weren't a lot of telltale signs.
So let's talk about Paddock for a second.
Sure.
And by the way, I agree with you. I don't think any law could have stopped him from getting a gun. Now, let's talk about what type of gun. There are guns out there, I'm sure you would agree, that are designed for one purpose and one purpose only. It's not for hunting. It's not for defense. It's for killing as many people in a short period of time as possible. In my personal opinion, and I know a lot of Democrats would agree with me on this one, and a lot of Republicans would not. I'm not saying I agree with better or work, that there has to be a mandatory buyback to the government. I thought that was an extreme left position. We're not going to get anywhere by doing that. In a perfect world, would it be nice to have all these assault weapons gone? In my personal opinion, yes, but that's not going to happen. But I do think some of these weapons should not be sold, for example, to an 18-year-old kid. What happened in California? He comes to Nevada. He buys the weapon at 18. This kid can't even buy a beer. Okay, right. And then he goes illegally with this weapon back into California and kills 3 people in that. Forgot what it was called. Gilroy, the Gilroy,
shooting. Texas.
I don't think those weapons should be sold to anybody. I understand your point, the mental illness thing, and I agree with you on that. That's one of many issues here when it comes to gun control. But what do you make of these assault weapons?
Well, when we're talking about military assault weapons, we're talking about automatic weapons. We're talking about things that were never intended and currently are illegal in most people's hands. In order to get a license or what we call a tax stamp to possess and use an automatic weapon, you have to go through a lengthy FBI check. I mean, you go, I forget if it's Quantico or Langley or wherever it goes, but it's months. It can take a year or more to get that tax stamp, and they go through a really intense background check. And essentially, if you're a federally firearm licensee, an FFL, and you go through the steps to own, possess, and use those firearms, then presumably you're safe. But what many people don't understand is that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about semi-automatic weapons, which take a lot of different forms. Some of them are dressed up to look sexy, like what we hear in the industry is they look sexy. They look like something you would see on a video game, but they're not. They're so you can attach a light to it. Well, you can attach a light on an ordinary stock if you want to, but these are semi-automatic weapons, and they're no different than any other hunting rifle in that respect. Now, that said, should we be more careful about who's getting them? Probably. I mean, we have a pretty what's the word I want? Some places are kind of lax in how they administer the rules. But then we also get these knee-jerk reactions like SB 143 was, which was, a prominent person comes into the state, drops a lot of money into the elections, and miraculously can get a bill through in 3 days. Nobody else can do that. And ultimately, it was not. It is.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But ultimately, it was not something that was well vetted. And this came out in the hearing when the attorney representing, I believe it was Anytown, or Everytown USA, he came in and we were talking about the distinction between those that were members of the family and could transfer to a member of the family. Well, what about in-laws? No, the way to do that is to have the family member buy it and then give it to you. And then I pointed out, well, isn't that a violation of the Federal Straw Man Act?
Should be.
And would put the person in prison for more than a year.
You shouldn't be allowed to do that.
No, and you can't. It's currently illegal under federal law. But he missed that point.
There are loopholes, though.
No, not like you think there are.
But you can sell me a gun in certain places, and there is no background check.
Okay.
I don't agree with that.
Well, and I'm not arguing against background checks. In fact, when we were talking about this in committee and as a caucus, I said I don't personally have a problem with background checks in any respect. How else are we going to make sure that?
So why are we not getting it done then? Why is the president not getting it done?
Because so often, as happened in this case, I voted against it because the red flag logs were a little too wild.
But that's something where Republicans and Democrats should be able to come together. Yeah.
The issue is they tack on things that we can't agree to in order to say, oh, you voted against that. I'm not opposed. I was never opposed to
So you think Democrats are putting that's interesting what you're saying. By the way, if you're just joining us, Republican Nevada State Senator Keith Pickard. So you're saying you're accusing the Democrats of putting things in some of these bills knowing that there's no chance it's going to be passed and people like you are going to vote no. And then they go back and they say, well, Republicans once again shooting down another bill, for lack of a better term. So that's what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, that's politics. We see that across the country. But at the end of the day, they did that in a number of bills.
Yeah.
And this was no different.
Well, that's not good. JD, go ahead. I know you had a question for the senator.
Well, yeah, one question about background checks. There has been about 226 million background checks done since 1990 in the United States of America. Only 1.6 million have been turned down. Do you think that's an issue?
Well, if we turn down one, if we're talking about a felon or someone,
and then I have one more.
That didn't or shouldn't have a gun, then the system worked. And I think that's appropriate. But there are a lot of things where if we go into the real statistics, it doesn't bear out a lot of the things we do because politics is definitionally reactionary. Politicians are probably the least creative thinkers on the planet. We react.
That's interesting you say that because you're a politician.
Well, I'm an accidental politician. I fell into this. This is not my lifetime
I don't
goal.
disagree with you, by the way.
But are you enjoying it?
At times, yeah.
At times, all right.
He gets to talk to people like us.
Absolutely.
Well, but I came into this accidentally when I was a newly minted family lawyer and saw that there was a problem with the Supreme Court decision on something I was kind of passionate about. And I called my assemblyman, who was a friend of mine, and I said, Lynn, this is what just happened. This is the problem. This is how we fix it. He said, draft the bill. He sponsored it. I went up and lobbied for it. This was in 2015, AB 263, and the governor signed it. And so I realized one person can make a difference. And so when Lynn decided not to run again, I ran for his seat.
Good for you. And I'm glad it worked out for you. You guys, go ahead.
So considering that the Second Amendment was passed in 1789, and back then the most powerful weapon was probably a musket, let's say, where you could, 5 people in 5 minutes or something you could probably kill. And now you have these automatic weapons, you have these semi-automatic rifles where you can get off 8 or 90 rounds in a minute and a half. Do you think that the Second Amendment should be revisited to match technology?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the Second Amendment wasn't about technology. The Second Amendment was about protecting the citizenry from an oppressive government. And at the end of the day, that still exists. We're starting to talk about government stepping in a way that they've never done before, not only taking our guns, and yes, I think Beto is overstepping there. I don't think that'll ever happen, at least not in my lifetime. But
not logical. It's not going to happen.
It doesn't. It doesn't stand.
But you also have to understand.
He's not talking about all guns, though.
He's not talking about
all guns.
Yes.
No.
But you also
right.
have to understand, Senator.
But then look too.
Texas.
At the end of the day, what type of gun is used most often in killing people? It's a handgun. It's not, and I'm not saying that AR-15s or AR-10s aren't more destructive. They will kill more people in less time than anything else. No question.
But you look at the last several mass shootings.
Right.
You look at what happened here in Vegas. You look at the Walmart shooting. It was not a handgun. Now, if you asked,
that's right.
And if you asked me, or Dayton, the last several mass shootings, the big ones, and if you asked me if I'm in, God forbid, you or I, if I'm in a supermarket and somebody has a gun, you're damn right I would rather have them have a handgun than one of these assault weapons.
No question.
And the shooter in Las Vegas wasn't up on the 21st floor of the Mandalay Bay firing at a crowd with a handgun. With a Glock. Right. He wasn't. He was firing with an AR-15 and with a number of weapons that are considered assault weapons. But I wanted to address this with you, Senator, given you work at the state level, but this obviously is a national issue. Sure. And recently, in the past few days, we've had news come out of Washington, D.C. that it's possible that President Trump and his administrations may take steps to address gun legislation.
Sure,
and it has met immense resistance from those on the right side of the aisle and those that are pro Second Amendment people, because it's being looked at as a glass ceiling, as if they're shattering. Look, this is remarkable that Republicans would actually take steps to do anything with respect to gun legislation. So I want to get your thoughts on this.
Sure.
Are you on board? Are you in the camp of we shouldn't be thinking about making any drastic changes, or we shouldn't be addressing this in any way?
Well, I think we need to first stay within the constitutional boundaries, right? But we limit rights all the time. There's time, place, and manner kinds of things. But should we be disarming people? No. Should we be wise and thoughtful in what we're doing? Yes. But how much thoughtfulness have you seen come out of Washington, D.C. lately?
Well, there's. I don't know about thoughtfulness is the right way to address it. It's more
but that's the point, isn't it?
productive dialogue, whether or not it's legislation, whether it's not steps being taken to solve the quote unquote problem. Right.
Right.
That's that's the whole purpose of government.
I mean, the one thing that in my view, government exists to do is fix the problems that the individuals can't fix on their own. And so this is an area where I think we do have some ground to make up. But does it mean wholesale prohibition on a class of weapons? Probably not, because we don't have agreement on to what that class of weapon looks like. You use the term assault weapon, and, if you think about it, when that M16 with a wooden stock first came out, that was the assault weapon of its day.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about automatic weapons. I'm talking about we should not be putting everything in the same bucket. Instead, we should be saying, if this is a semi-automatic weapon, it is not an assault rifle. I don't care what it looks like.
But I'm looking at it as a person, as a lay person, as the average American, right? I'm looking at it as someone who was in the military, okay, back in the early 90s, late 80s, where, yes, we used the M16A1, we used the M16A2 as weapons of war. The AR-15, it's considered a weapon of, look, I understand there are some people on the right and some people who are saying, oh, I go hunting with my AR-15. I grew up in Michigan, and I know a lot of people in the hunting culture. I don't necessarily remember the AR-15 or weapons like that being used. My point being is that there is an overall perception in America that when we're talking about assault weapons, whether we want to use that phrase or not, there's certain weapons that do not belong on American streets, and that is what we're talking about. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of people that are on the right side of the aisle that want to translate that into, they just want to take all your guns. And I think when you put that out there, it's misleading.
But you're talking about political rhetoric. In the reality, though, nobody's in the same place on the spectrum. So where you would draw the line, what kind of guns do we prohibit, and where I draw the line will be different. But should we keep – I think we can come to agreement on a lot of things, like should we keep automatic weapons out of the hands of people? Absolutely. Should we ban bump stocks? Absolutely, because those make the semi-automatic weapons appear, at least in action, to be – an automatic weapon.
Sure.
But the idea that we're banning a weapon because of what it looks like is just ludicrous.
Well,
to me.
I don't think anybody wants to ban a weapon for what it looks like.
But that's what we're doing when we're talking about assault weapons, and we're talking about an AR-15, which is a semi-automatic, and I can't, and I did competitive shooting, and I can't shoot more than two a second.
I'm going to take phone calls, but let's talk specifically about the weapon that was used in Walmart where that animal killed 22 people.
Sure.
Right? That gun, in my personal opinion, should not be sold to anybody. It should not be on the streets. That specific weapon, if that was a lower caliber weapon, he would not have killed 22 people. And so I want to be specific.
It's not caliber, because .223, in fact, a .22 will do more damage in a body than a larger caliber round. It's not, again, we're missing the point in my view. We could debate literally all day long about what weapon is used, and we're not spending enough time talking about who's behind it.
I think we could do both.
Oh, and we should.
Yeah.
But we're not spending near enough time on the mental illness issue.
To your point, though, okay, the people behind it, what you're talking about is mental illness.
Absolutely.
Right? And what we're trying to distinguish here in this debate, in my opinion, when it comes to mass shootings, why in the United States of America is this an epidemic? Okay, look, there are mass shootings all over the world, all right, but it's on a much smaller scale at other countries around the world.
Sure.
You have to ask the question, Senator, why in the United States of America, with our gun culture and with our laws, all right, are these things much more prevalent than other countries around the world?
And since Donald Trump took office, gun violence, I'm not even talking about mass shootings, 40,000 people have died at the hands of guns.
There's mental illness all over the world.
We've seen violence overall go up, too.
Yes,
and
hate crimes.
It's not just been regarding firearms. But at the end of the day, look at our culture. Look at how we train our kids. Look at how we raise them. You cannot tell me, and I'm going to probably get a lot of hate mail about this, but you cannot tell me that the culture of our video games, where we're planting kids 4 hours a day, and most of them are shoot-'em-up type games or violence, even the car driving games are violent, And yet we expect our kids who, by the way, when we talk about brain formation, we're talking about the typical brain doesn't.
I'm glad you brought this up.
Kids play video games all over the world.
It doesn't finish developing until you're 25 or so, right?
Right.
And so and the last thing to develop is the prefrontal cortex, which is the judgment center of the brain. Mm-hmm. And so you end up with these kids, and you're training them and you're normalizing this violent behavior, and then you would think that they're going to act differently when they become adults. Not at all.
I'm glad you brought that up.
And then factor in education or the lack thereof, and also
the lack thereof,
also non-complete families, single parent families without solid father influences, that can be an issue too. So I agree. Now, at what point do you have to consider the ammunition? Because these guns are killing the people, but no one's getting pistol whipped. The bullet is what's actually murdering these people, and some of these bullets are armor piercing. They explode inside your body. At what point do you consider possibly just raising the price or limiting the access to specific ammunition?
Well, again, and limiting it's going to raise the price.
Right.
But the ammunition. I don't know how to answer that, because your armor piercing is already, if it's truly armor piercing, it's already being scrutinized. I do think that's going to make some sense. Mm-hmm. The steel core is the result of the BLM and conservationists. They don't want lead in the environment, which makes a lot of sense. And those tend to be penetrating as well. So that's a more complex issue, and really we have to get our arms around that. Sure. I don't have a good answer on that. But yes, is it something? Everything is on the table in my book, except the idea that we're going to confiscate guns or make guns harder to get for the law-abiding citizen. Because at the end of the day, we look at these gun-free zones, gun-free cities, cities that make it almost impossible for a law-abiding citizen to get a weapon, and then the only ones that have the weapons are the criminals, and that's just a mistake.
Well, Senator, we have a lot of people waiting on hold, and I haven't even given out the number yet. Would you be gracious enough to stay for one more segment so we could get to education as well? Is that okay?
Yeah, I think I can.
That is very nice of you. Senator, we really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. Republican Nevada State Senator Keith Pickard, very gracious enough to stick around for one more segment. We really do appreciate that. Number to call, 257-5396, 702-257-5396. We're going to talk about education, more issues that you are passionate about when we come back. We appreciate it, Senator. We'll be back right after this. All right, welcome back. It is the Vegas Take. Shapiro, Chris Wynn in studio. Republican Nevada State Senator Keith Pickard been gracious enough to stick around for one more segment. We are going to get to the education topic as well. I know he's very passionate about that, and we all should be, because the Clark County School District, let's call it for what it is disastrous right now for many different reasons. But we'll stick on the gun control issue, because I know we have some callers that have been waiting patiently on hold to ask the Senator a question at 257-5396. Why don't we start off with Steve? Steve, you're on with the Senator. How are you?
Yes, thanks for taking my call,
sure.
Senator. The single most important reason for the people to maintain and secure their rights to bear arms is as a protectorate against the tyranny of government. Who was quoted as saying that?
Oh, well, I just said it. I mean, ultimately, that's my statement, but that's my understanding of the intents of the founding fathers. When they
that's correct. That was Thomas Jefferson.
Okay.
They understood that they fought against cannons, even though they only had muskets.
Right. But again, the Second Amendment was not about the technology of the day. It was about the intent to hold off an oppressive government.
Doesn't matter what the technology is. As a matter of fact, the founding fathers, if they were alive today, they would tell you that the people should have greater firepower than its government. So a lot of people disagree with that because they believe in big government. But big government's only purpose is to defend the populace. Look at Hong Kong. Look at Venezuela. Look at these countries where they're having massive freedom problems.
I understand, Steve.
If we are going to remain a free country.
I understand your point, Steve.
We have to accept that as fact.
I understand that, Steve. Quickly, go ahead, because I got other callers.
Let me finish my point, and then I'll hang up. You guys can.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Steve.
I wrote this down, so I'll read it as fast as I can. I just want to get it out as quick as possible.
You wrote a script? Wow, I feel honored.
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this for years. People really need to get on board with what I'm about.
If you were in a legislative committee, the chairman would just cut you off. But go ahead.
Is it a love poem to me, Steve, or what is it?
It's to you.
Okay.
It's to you, Brian.
Thank you.
You're the sweetest guy I know.
All right, Steve, I like you. You sweet talk me. Go ahead.
So anyone who will not engage in an intelligent discussion about an automatic death penalty legislation related to mass killings basically is part of the problem today. And from this point forward, they really need to get on board this train. I've spoken to the NRA. I've started about starting an ADP, in other words, automatic death penalty legislation campaign. The whole idea of an ADP is to build a protective barrier in a potential killer's mind before they commit the horrendous crime. Before they commit.
All right, hold on. The senator disagrees, Steve.
Even though they take themselves out a lot of the time.
Okay, Steve, let's let the senator respond. Steve, I gotta let you go because I gotta let the senator respond to that. Senator, you are shaking your head. Why do you disagree with that?
Yeah, no, because I don't believe that these people who are mentally ill are thinking about, gee, am I going to go to prison or am I going to face the death penalty?
They just don't care.
It doesn't enter their mind. I think they care. I just don't think that's on the top of their mind when they're thinking about what they're doing. They're messed up.
Mm-hmm. Understood. 257-5396. I believe our next caller would be Dave. Dave, you're on with the senator. Go ahead.
What's up, Dave?
Hey, this is a really an important topic.
Agree.
And I gotta say, it kind of sounds like, as a whole, I know this is a generality, as a whole, we as society seem to be attacking this from the wrong end. My question on this is, why are people breaking so evil? If you take the guns away, someone intent on doing evil is going to find a way. It's not going to matter about the guns.
Dave, can I just respond to that? You say it doesn't matter about the guns. So what would you rather have? Would you rather have someone go into a school, God forbid, with a knife or an AR-15? You're going to tell me it doesn't matter?
I think the question is not that simple.
No, I think it is that simple. With all due respect.
As an example, I'm going to point to that dude in Japan a few weeks ago that set all his coworkers on fire.
Okay, number one, that happened in Japan. Number two, when you look at all the mass shootings that have happened in this country, that didn't happen that way. The mass shootings in this country are happening by assault weapons, the majority of them, Dave. So it is about guns.
But I think Dave has a point here, and that is that people regularly no, let me back up. It's not regular. But the mentally ill, the people that are intent to do harm to others will find ways of doing it.
Agree.
And so,
but will the carnage be as bad?
But the Japanese example, I think, is valid because it is an example of something that could happen here.
But you can't legislate things that are so vague, like evil, right? We don't. When it comes to our government and when it comes to our state government, that we're not talking about how do you tackle evil. We're talking about actual day-to-day things that we can address and problems that we can solve, right?
Sure, but we're unfortunately relegating ourselves to politics by soundbite instead of politics by sincere debate.
I don't disagree with that, and that's why, like the caller said, these conversations need to happen more. Not between radio hosts necessarily, we enjoy them, but between other politicians like yourself that maybe are on the other side of an issue. 257-5396. Let's go to Jim. Jim, you're on with the senator. Jim, go ahead. Thank you, Jim. That was the best call we've had all day. 257-5396. Let's go to Mike. Mike, what's going on?
Hello?
Yes, Mike, you're on. Go ahead.
How are you, sir?
Good.
I got a comment, kind of agree with the guy that just called.
Okay.
The weapon is not the problem. The guns are not a problem. You can get a 22 with 30 rounds, and you can make more damage than you do with an AR-15. It's not about a caliber. The AR-15 is not an assault weapon. It's a rifle. It's a semi-automatic. It's not automatic. I keep hearing you guys on the radio every day. Automatic weapon, assault weapon.
I actually made that point.
How are the mass shootings? Those weapons the weapon you just described? How many mass shootings in America have taken place with that weapon? The number zero. So yeah, I'm just gonna. I'm kind of leading to the point I'm making, which is yes, I understand what you're saying, and what you're saying is factual. But the point being is that we're addressing the situation of mass shootings in America, and the weapon of choice for these mass shootings have not been the weapon that you just described.
Yeah, and for the record, that was not the senator talking.
Right, exactly. If you're just joining us, Republican Nevada State Senator Keith Pickard, I'm going to try to squeeze in a few more quick calls, then I do want to get to education because I know you're very passionate about that. 257-5396 is the number to call. Let's go to Anthony. Anthony, you're next. What's up?
Yes, good morning, gentlemen. I think that we should just implement the ban we had in place before Bush came into office and allowed it to expire. Just like JD, I served, 82nd Airborne, jumper.
Thank you
MOS.
for your service, sir. We appreciate it.
Oh, it's my country. I love this Constitution, and I would die for it again.
Well, I wish we had more people like you, sir, because you're a hero. Go ahead.
Great country. I think that my MOS was weapons and communications. My weapon was a mortar. I don't see nobody with mortars.
Right.
So I think that, and I think it's hard to carry up a mountain, but in order to get my wings, that's what I had to do. So I think that implement the ban we had in place, put it back in place. And I wonder if the senator would go for that. And again, I started gang banging at 9 years old. I was jumping into a gang at 9.
Wow.
All of our weapons that we bought, Watts, California, Los Angeles, all of our weapons came from someone who bought them at a gun show.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, let's let the senator. Anthony, thank you again, by the way, for your service. That is a very good question, and I want to let the senator answer that. Thank you for the call, Anthony.
Yeah, and I'll repeat it. Thank you for your service. That's important work. I wouldn't go so far as to reinstate the ban that we had before because I believed it went too far. But again, we're talking about where do we draw the line, right? I may not draw the line in the same place that someone else would, but it deserves a conversation. Again, I do agree these are not assault weapons in that no soldier would take these weapons into war with them. They take automatic weapons. But, we can debate the details, and I welcome that debate.
All right, so I wanted to, and by the way, I appreciate this conversation. It's been a little longer than I think we all thought, but I want to talk a little bit about education. And I know you've been very passionate about this, and we all know what's transpired, Senator, right over the last several weeks.
Sure.
The Clark County School District, one of the worst school districts, sadly, in the country for a lot of different reasons. We talked a little off the air about parenting, right? The fact that the parents aren't there, and then these kids are misbehaving, and then you have teachers that are being underpaid, and then teachers are not getting the raises that they deserve. What are your thoughts on this issue? Because it's a mess. We all can agree it's a mess.
Well, I could spend much more than an hour on this topic because this is probably, in my view, the most important thing we can do as a state short of public safety. But I do think that most of what we saw over the last month was theatrics. I did not believe that although I was actually leaning toward the side of the teachers on this one, because the district made a promise to them that if they did certain things, 3 years later they would see the column movement, which would lead to an increase in salary. And then they came back and they couldn't provide it. But I think this is a legislative leadership issue. It wasn't CCSD per se, although they struggled with the numbers. It wasn't CCEA. I mean, their job is to protect the adults in the room. What got lost in the discussion was the discussion about the kids. How are we going to educate the kids
and who
best?
Suffers in this?
Right, and
the kids.
The kids are unfortunately the financiers of last resort, so to speak. They're the ones that end up with the biggest cost. And so what my goal was, and I put this on my website, I put this out in social media posts, that the problem wasn't about the money. We had plenty of money. Well, we never have enough money, right? But that we had plenty of money in the system to pay all of this and then some. But what happened was, so for example, we had permanent funding planned for the school safety and Millennium scholarships.
Yep.
And then that was pulled out and redirected elsewhere. And then we did it with one-shots, which frankly had been done with one-shots for years and years before. And I don't dispute that. But we had an opportunity. It was in the budget to take a piece of I think it was the marijuana money, if I recall correctly, and the retail tax piece.
And it wasn't done.
And they took it to spend on, $2.5 million or $2.2 million in Reno Rodeo in Senator Ratty's district, or $25 million at UNLV instead of bonding this stuff. It was
absurd.
They took what would have been permanent funding and to the tune of $30 million. They took it out, and then they put $16 million back, and then patted themselves on the back.
Just a misappropriations of funds.
Well, it's not misappropriation. It's within their realm to do that. That's their prerogative. They're in the majority.
But the wrong way of doing it.
But it's certainly, it was wrong in my view. And so I think it was said, May 23rd or 28th, I came out and said, look, we met with fiscal staff. We know there's at least $140 million, and that doesn't include the MBT, the modified business tax buy down. So here's $140 million. in that is unallocated, because we were watching them shave dollars off the governor's recommended budget, what we call GovRec, and they weren't saying what they were going to do with that money. And so we came out and said, look, we've met with fiscal staff. We know the money is there. Let's spend it on education. And I pointed to three things that, I was asked, what would you spend it on? But, I wanted to spend it on education. Some of it did go to education, but a lot of it went into the districts of the people that were in the majority. And so we failed our school kids. We could have spent more.
And that's the end result there. If you're just joining us, by the way, in studio, Republican Nevada State Senator Keith Pickard. So joining us on the line right now, Senator, like you, former teacher, now runs his own school, Infinity, the Math Institute. John Brookhagen is a former Clark County School District teacher, so he wants to talk to you about that issue. John, thanks for calling in. You're on with the Senator.
Thank you very much. Hey, Senator, I wanted to say thank you very much for bringing some of the subjects to light that really need to be brought up.
Oh, you're welcome.
You were introduced as somebody who wanted to not talk about the Band-Aid of gun control, and you wanted to talk about the long-term solutions of education. And then we went on for 40 minutes to hear you talk about gun control.
Yeah, don't blame me.
Yes, well, I'm glad we finally made the transition. And you already addressed some of the things that I wanted to bring up to you. Mostly being that there is enough money in the system. It's that it's not being taken care of correctly, a lot of broken promises. And some of the other things I wanted to speak about is just education as a whole. Every time we're talking about education, we're talking about the politics of education, and nobody from the CCEA to CCSD to the school board, nobody's talking about what we could do to improve the children's education. We're talking about financing. We're talking about politics. We're talking about who gets suspended and other kind of cultural problems that we're having in the school system. And the one thing that's getting lost in all of this is the education of our youth, class sizes, and I believe making the teachers happy so they could make the kids happy and, have that kind of a snowball effect on improving everybody.
So
I know a lot of the high schools are fudging their stats to get better graduation rates and stuff like that.
Sure.
And that's bringing us up in the ranks, but it's not educating our children.
Let's let the Senator respond to that, John. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Yeah, well, I think you're right in many respects. I mean, we've lost the airtime talking about education, and we're talking about adult issues. That said, this is one place where I think the union, the CCEA, really, frankly, did the right thing in that they were saying, look, you made a promise. You said you would do this, and then now you're telling us you can't because the legislature didn't give enough money. Well, it turns out that they did tell the governor and the legislative leadership that this column advancement was in the budget and we needed to protect it. But I don't know if they didn't advocate loudly enough or if the leadership just didn't care. But at the end of the day, it didn't get adequately funded, and there was plenty of money originally to do that.
We had a teacher that called in last week, and she I believe makes $50,000 a year. She's been a teacher here for 27 years in the Clark County School District with a master's degree. What do you make of that?
Oh, that's just upside down. I said when I ran for the assembly 4 years ago that we should be paying teachers like rock stars and rock stars like teachers, in my view. Mm-hmm. Not that they don't they don't provide a social
Point
good,
taken,
but
though, yeah.
nothing like what an educator does. And we don't prioritize them.
Mm-hmm.
They're just, I think that a classroom teacher, an elementary school teacher, should be a six-figure job. It should be.
Yeah, I was just talking about this on the air last week where I said if you're a cocktail waitress, whatever the case may be, a strip, whatever the case may be.
I can speak to that personally. And myself, when I moved to Las Vegas back in 2003, I worked for a prominent restaurant down in the Las Vegas Strip. My mother is a special ed teacher in Michigan. My father was also an administrator and an educator. My mother would make comments to me. It was like, I can't believe how much money you're making, because I was making six figures.
Well, I think
on the Las Vegas Strip, in the service industry, and it didn't require any type of education whatsoever.
But that's because the people that are hiring the service industry people understand the importance of having somebody like you in there.
Yes, we all agree on that. Let's try to squeeze in a few more quick phone calls with the Senator. Let's go to Brian. Brian, what's going on? Thank you, Brian, for that phone call. We appreciate it. 257-5396. Let's go to John. John, are you there? You're on with the Senator.
Yes, sir. Hey, Brian. Hey, Senator. How are you?
Doing good, John. What's on your mind?
Tuned into your show, Brian. Got caught it a couple weeks ago, and great banter, very passionate. I really enjoy it.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks a lot,
to start
John.
off with the education part of it, it's every cycle. It just keeps going in cycles. We need money for the education. We need money for the police. We need money for the firefighters. And all these projects are created sort of like the marijuana, what the senator was saying, that the money was supposed to go to education. We're ranked, 50th in the whole United States?
Not good.
Yeah, but understand we're 18th in teacher pay. We're not 50th in teacher pay.
Right.
And we're 50th in part because of how they do those rankings. I'm sorry, go ahead.
As education and graduation, we have the lowest in the country.
Yep. Let's let the senator respond to that.
So on that point, the kids are not getting educated. It all starts with leadership, which, of course, the federal government is all taking control of that and given the itinerary and the curriculum to do that, which is wrong. It should go back to the state.
All right, John, let's let the senator respond to that. Go ahead.
No, you're right. I mean, it's interesting is we were meeting with teachers all session long. The thing that they were telling us was that, yeah, pay is important, but what's more important is class size issues. Mm-hmm. You know, they're cramming too many students in there. And it's the class size issue right now that we're not addressing. And what I mean by that is most of the Clark County school districts are at capacity in terms of the number of classrooms they have. But they don't get to control how many students come in. It's whatever student is there, they have to stick in the room. And so this is why I have made a call for many years about looking at public-private partnerships. We had, after the downturn, we had so much excess office space that could very quickly have been secured and turned into classroom space, and then we could have hired, because half the problem we have, because there's no, it's outside the box. Yeah. We don't have the authority, or we haven't given the school districts the authority to do that. And because, look at what they just did with the Supreme Court building, right? They just built a brand new Supreme Court building that the state does not own. We lease it. And so when that building becomes functionally obsolescent and we have to do a major remodel, we're not on the hook. Right? But yet we do that with schools. We've got schools that are literally crumbling around our feet, and we can't afford to rebuild it. But if that were owned by somebody else, we could be putting our dollars to work elsewhere. I mean, there are a lot of solutions to these things that bring costs down.
Which is really interesting because the Clark County School District budget last year was $4.2 billion, as our education correspondent told us. A lot of elementary schools, they kind of look like prisons. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, because, well, yeah. Well, my answer is yes, I've noticed that.
Well,
why? Because it was designed that way. And you know, ultimately, you know, there are a lot of questions that have to do with design changes because needs change. At the end of the day, I'm less concerned about that than I am getting enough classrooms where we can bring the classroom sizes down or the teacher ratios down so that we can actually educate our kids.
Senator, before we go, and by the way, thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thanks a lot, Senator.
Before we go, can you plug your website, how people can talk to you, whether it be social media, email, whatever? We got about 30 seconds.
Sure. It's all the same. It's Pickard for Nevada. That's Pickard, the number 4, Nevada spelled out, .com is the website. It's at Pickard for Nevada on all my social media as well.
Senator, thank you so much for doing this.
Well,
this is really an important conversation. I think it was a great conversation and educational conversation, certainly. Thank you so much for being here. We really do appreciate it. We hope we can do it again with you sometime down the road. All right, there you go. Senator Keith Pickard taking the time to join us. Take a quick break. Be back right after this.